Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Pops.
And welcome to our NFC East episode. We'll be bringing, all the different teams we'll go through, just like we did with the AFC East. This one, I got a feeling we'll get a little bit more in depth in terms of what the teams are doing, because they have a lot more free agents that are big-time players that are possibly on the verge of leaving. Their contracts are definitely up. But before we get into that, past and present. So you ready, Pops?
Yeah, let's go ahead with it.
All right, so you did me a solid with giving me two guys last week that were in the playoffs. So I'm going to do you the solid and tell you that both of these guys are present players. So your first one, we'll go with school and the teams they played for and see if you can get it. So first guy played for the University of Florida, then played for the Saints, the Eagles, and now plays on the Lions. So Florida, Saints, Eagles, Lions. If you need a side of the football, let me know, and I can give you that hint. Yeah, it is defense.
Yeah, it's probably going to be defense. So I'm assuming he's probably the same guy that got told by Baker Mayfield that he didn't watch any film, and then we saw him throw a ball back at Mayfield after he picked him off. So I'm going to lock in CJ DJ.
It is CJ Gardner-Johnson. That is who this guy is. I thought it'd be a good pick. We're recording this before the conference championship games. I think he's going to have a pretty critical role in shutting down the overtop of Debo and Brennan Ayuk. Even Kittle. Kittle's a great tight end. I think guys respect him. I don't think that people put him in the same class as Kelsey, which I get. Kelsey is, you look at him and he's in the same conversations with Gronk as the greatest tight end, in possible history. We can debate that on another day of whether or not I believe that or not. They're both, I would say, definitely both of those guys are top two for sure. We can get into the semantics of different styles of offenses and everything, but he's going to have a tremendous responsibility this coming Sunday to try to shut down that for the Niners and get the Lions to the first Super Bowl.
And I think he's got his work cut out. Like you've already mentioned, we were up in the air on whether or not Debo was going to play this week or not. And, for those of you listening, we recorded this before the conference championships. And, now that Debo's playing, I think he's going to have his work cut out for sure.
Especially the fact that the Lions still have Cam Sutton playing cornerback. So he's pretty much the Kadarius Toney of not being able to cover anyone. So at least that showed up for the past few weeks. So great on that one. So your next one is give you the player and see if you can get the school. L'Jarius Sneed with Kansas City, the corner. So first, I guess your bigger hint is he's not Power 5. And if you need another hint, I can tell you a guy that went to his school that is a Hall of Famer. And if you know where this guy went to school, then you'll probably get it.
Yeah. I think I'm...
So the guy that went to this school is Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw went to this school.
Yeah, so Louisiana Tech. I got to be honest, if you didn't say Bradshaw, I would have no idea where he went to school at.
It is Louisiana Tech, which is... I feel like we are going to have to do an episode on this. I think it's a super interesting, I don't even know how to phrase it in terms of when you really start to look at the NFL and you start to understand it a little bit more, you really start to see that you would sit back and go, oh, all the guys in the NFL are Power 5 guys. And it's like, no, they're not. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Power 5 players. But, you look at some of the guys, especially both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive guys, and some of the low-level names that you get in terms of where they went to school. You for sure see it. I went to the Hall of Fame this past week, and you see it even in there. that you got guys, Favre's coming out of Southern Miss. You got
Jerry
guys coming out of
Rice,
schools that you're just like, where is this? And it's like, yeah, oh, yeah. I mean,
Walter
one of
Payton.
my favorites
No.
is, I'm not sure, Andre Reed. Do you know where he went? This one is
No.
like it, super expert challenge. Cootstown. I had to look up where that is. Like, you hear stuff like that, and you're just like, I sit back and I want to go, who was the scout? Like, who
Mm-hmm.
was the dude that found him? Because that dude, deserves a, some type of recognition to go out and find that guy. That's incredible. It's incredible that some of these guys have been found, by these scouts. But two great guesses by you. So we can get into it with the NFC East. We'll go through just in terms of how they finish. I think the unique thing, I want to talk about how they finish because I think it's since the early 2000s, they have had a different division winner every single year. And it proved it yet again this year. When the Eagles are sitting there at 10-1, everyone thinks Eagles are bound for the Super Bowl. Eagles fall off a cliff. Dallas ends up winning the division. Eagles come in second. You just sort of, and then both of them have tremendous. I think the Eagles was less surprising in the fact that they folded. Dallas's shouldn't have been a surprise just based upon the last, close to 30 years of history of them struggling, but it was a shock that the Packers absolutely blew them out of the building at home. So taking a look at the NFC East last year, Dallas finished at 12-5, Philly 11-6. The Giants came in third at 6-11, and Washington followed it up at the bottom of the barrel per the standard here recently at 4-13. So taking a look at the NFC East last year, what were your big surprises, takeaways, and then we'll get into the individual teams.
Yeah, I think for the general consensus, minus the COVID year in 2020, it's really kind of been the Cowboys and Eagles show to debate on who has the better team. Looking now, 2020, the Washington football team, not the Commanders, the Washington football team won, and then the last time that they had won was 2015. But in between then, from 2015 till now, minus the COVID year, it's flip flop between Dallas and the Eagles, and that's kind of the way that it's been. Since Manning started the decline there with the Giants, and then as well as not having anybody to run the offense for the Redskins, the football team, Commanders, however you want to name them. But they haven't had a good team, and then we saw earlier this year, the Commanders started fire selling everybody. Giants, Danny Dimes get hurt, and so they don't have a quarterback anymore. And you kind of like, well, I don't think those guys would have helped the teams win or be competitive in the division, but I think they would have done better than where they're at now. And I think we're going to see a great decline there because, with the Giants, I mean, their biggest question mark is we already know we've got buyer's remorse on Danny Dimes. That's why you don't sink that much money into that guy out of Duke. But also Saquon, he's gone. So where do the Giants go from here? I don't think DeVito is the answer, and we'll go into each individual team. Commanders, they've got organizational change that's coming, and so we'll see what the new regime, if you want to call it, brings in. I think being the enemy did a great job with the offense, but where do they go? Do they retain him or not is another question. And then, Dan Quinn is being rumored to Seattle, so he might be out at Dallas. So there's a little bit of change there after he's had such a great defense and even put up a great defense without Trevon Diggs this year. And the Eagles, they just brought in Vic Fangio and swept house there minus Sirianni. So there's a lot of question marks. I still think Eagles got Jason Kelsey retiring as well. It hasn't been officially said, but I think everybody's kind of read through the lines, and I think he's done. There's a lot of turnover that's about to happen. I think if you had to ask me right now, just general consensus, it's going to be against the Dallas Cowboys and the Eagles again next season. I think the Dallas will have a better team. It's just who's going to be running that defense if Dan Quinn leaves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I couldn't have said any of that better myself in terms of sort of summing up each of these different teams. I think an interesting one to start with, just because of a lot of different pieces they have moving. And I think that their draft pick is more interesting, is the Giants. Is they got the number 6 overall pick. As you talked about, they throw 160 million at Daniel Jones. Really sort of puts them into a position, in my opinion, that they don't draft a quarterback. The only way I see them drafting a quarterback is for them to trade up for Caleb Williams and go get him. I don't think that if Caleb Williams somehow fell to them, which also I don't see happening, I think that at 6 for them, they're looking at the positions of helping that offensive line, because the offensive line's sort of been trash, and the position of wide receiver. I really think it's going to be a wide receiver. You look at the roster, they go out and get Jalen Hyatt last year. Really, he fell in the draft, and I think people thought he was going to have more of an impact. Really doesn't show up. You look at the rest of their guys. I mean, Sterling Short, all these guys that they've had, and I just sort of sit back and go, most of them are past their prime with Slayton and these other dudes. The Giants need to put wide receivers around Daniel Jones. And it's funny that you mentioned the decline of Eli. I think that they put so much on Eli, and they really never surrounded him with talent. Like, he had Odell, but once Odell got hurt and started falling out of the picture, he wasn't the same guy anymore for Eli. And the rest of the roster was sort of in shambles. Yes, he had Victor Cruz and some other guys, but it's tough to, balance that out. I look at the Giants this year. They're losing Adoree Jackson, their cornerback. I think Saquon, just as you, is gone, unless the Giants want to come out and spend a lot of money to keep him, which I don't think they have the cap for. And get to the cap here in a second. They lose a linebacker they traded for from Arizona, who was a first round pick, in Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson. They now have him. He's looking to go on. One of their wide receivers, Paris Campbell's looking to depart, and starting safety Xavier McKinney. They are 22 million positive in the cap, so they do have money to spend, but I think it is one that you take a look at the potential free agents that are open, especially on the wide receiver market. It'll be interesting to see where they go in terms of how they balance this out, especially with the number 6 pick. So after sort of hearing that diatribe of what they're losing, where their draft pick is, cap money, where do you think the Giants look to in the offseason of their bigger goals to fill?
Yeah, it kind of starts, with the leader of that offense and Daniel Jones. And one of the things that I see being an issue is, Daboll is it kind of sucks for Daboll because he's already kind of came out and said that that's not their guy and that's not really who they're looking for. But they're stuck with him. So I believe Daniel Jones would be a good backup. The problem is that he's getting starter money, and that organization is sunk there because nobody's going to trade for Daniel Jones to pay him, $40 million a year type money. The good news is they have Darren Waller, but again, Darren Waller was he didn't look like the Las Vegas Raiders Darren Waller on that offense. So there's a lot of question marks there about what we're going to see out of him moving forward. And then as far as what to address, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of gaps. The biggest one is going to be running back. Is who are they going to put in there to take over for Saquon? Honestly, like I know we don't see running backs go high. I think that would be high on my list on things we need to fix if we're not going to go get a quarterback. But who knows? This might be the opportunity, to go get one of those quarterbacks and let them at least sit behind Daniel Jones, for half a season maybe a full season, depending on how well Daniel Jones playing. Because let's remember, Daniel Jones just last season, healthy, got them to the playoffs. So yes, he's not that guy, but he still has the ability to play in certain. He shows glimpses of hope. So with that being said, running back would be my highest priority, and then obviously a defender, to try to fill the gap, fill the void, of some of those, the guys from the secondary and even the spots of, linebacker, as you were mentioning with Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, I know if Maul was on here right now, one of the things he threw out consistently throughout the year when they were playing, which it's very true, when Saquon wasn't in there, that offense was in complete shambles.
For
Like
sure.
they they relied on Saquon for so much. They're going to have to go and get someone. I will say, like, would I be shocked if Saquon came back to the Giants? No. And it's because of that fact that I think the Giants know, like, if we want to have a chance, we have to have a running back. And it's tough. Like, I was just looking at the 2024 draft class in terms of who they have ranked. They have Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas, but I believe it was his ACL that he tore. So he's coming off a big injury. Florida State running back Trey Benson, number 2 in the Blake Corum, running back out of Michigan. Blake had the tear last, 2 seasons ago, looked really good. So at least he's not, I don't think there's going to be questions in terms of how healthy is he going into the season. He's proven that with last year. And the good thing is like, I mean, you don't have to waste a high draft pick on a running back. They're going to come to the second round, and the Giants are going to be sitting there towards the top of the second round where you could easily go get somebody. And at the same time, there's going to be always those. I don't want to, it's not going to be your Josh Jacobs. Like, if you're going to go get a top tier running back in the market, you're just going to reset and Saquon. They're not going to go get Henry or Jacobs. But having someone that's a little bit older that gives you that spark, sort of like what the Lions did with David Montgomery. Like, there's always those in the Dolphins with the Raheem Mostert. There's those guys always in the market that you can go find and grab. I definitely see the Giants having that running back by committee and doing that, maybe going and grabbing a rookie to just, how does this guy play out? But as you pointed out with Daniel Jones's money, dude, you're just in a tough position because at the end of the day, it's very much like the Broncos with Russell Wilson. You may not like him, but he eats so much of your cap, you're sort of forced to just deal with him. Like,
Yep.
you don't have a choice. You can't. I really don't think the Giants can go get a quarterback in the draft and even to let him sit behind Daniel Jones, because at the end of the day, you're paying him too much money. Like, you're just sort of, it's sunk costs now. So I look at it more for the Giants in terms of what are they facing in the division. And I look at it from the standpoint of it's a passing division. You got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith with the Eagles, the Cowboys. I'm not sure I don't think Brandon Cooks is a free agent this year, but you still have CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. That tight end for Dallas is really, really good. I really like him. I know they're Gallup's hitting the market. The Cowboys are always going to be a passing team with Dak. The Commanders are just, I hate to say it, they're the Commanders. Like, you don't know what you're going to get out of them. But them losing Adoree Jackson possibly, sitting at number 6 in the draft, I think they go get a wide receiver, but I think that they could also be in the market for one of the top tier corners at number 6 to try to shore up that defense. You have to have someone to play keep away. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
So I could see it happening either way.
Yeah, I kind of see. They've got 2 picks in the second round. They've got 1 each round, 2 in the second round, due to a trade with Seattle. So I think you could honestly let maybe your wide receivers slip that low, or at least a running back. Running back, I think, would be easier If they want to try to look to get one of the prize picks, maybe I don't know if a Dunes would go that high, but I mean he's there out of Washington. That's he's been a proven guy with Penix all year for somebody that they can go pick up. But I definitely see. I think I would probably go after the corner, just as you mentioned. Uh, we see plenty of success stories. I mean, just look at Trayvon Diggs. What he's done for the Dallas defense just in the short time he's been in the league. So go get that top corner and see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up Trevon Diggs, because I'm going to get to that with Dallas here in a minute. I think that the issue for the Giants is that you're trying to shore up a defense, but you're also trying to get talent for your quarterback. And I think that when they I would, if I had to bet, I think they go get a wide receiver, just because, last year you get Hyatt later doesn't give you the impact that you want. So this year, I think Adune's going to be there, and Neighbors um, out of LSU. He had a better statistical year than Marvin Harrison Jr. And by all means, if somehow, some way, I don't see that happening at all, that Marvin Harrison Jr. falls down to 6, then they're going to take him. Like, I don't see him slipping that far. I don't see him getting past the Cardinals, honestly. But that's just sort of where they sit. Their biggest thing going in to next year is determining how do we manage Daniel Jones? Because, like you said, you put him in this. Him having that injury, he was a good runner. He wasn't Lamar, but he found ways to extend plays by running, and that's going to be tested. Like, I hate to say it, but when you get injured, you get nervous around that injury. You're not the same player. It takes some time for you to be like, trust your leg again, trust the game environment. It sucks. Like, and he's gonna have to battle through that. So I think they'll be better than the Commanders, but sort of like this year, not by a lot. That's just
Yeah,
the
yeah. I
hot
think
take.
I think we could see Daboll being on his way out of town, especially if he has another mid-year like he did last season.
There's no harder market than the Giants. Like, and to me, that's why Eli. We'll see what your opinion is on this. To me, Eli's a Hall of Famer.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
it. I know that people are like, well, he doesn't have the stats and all this other stuff. I'm like, one, he beat the only undefeated team to get to the Super Bowl in Brady,
yeah.
and then beat them again the next time they met. 2 Super Bowl wins. And I just believe that, like, when you go up there as a quarterback, that market is ruthless. Like, it it takes an extra level of just being that guy to make it in New York, and he made it. Like, had Tom Coughlin. Coughlin wins 2 Super Bowls with him. They had some chances. And, when he won, he was a 6th seed. Like, you think
Yeah.
about they went in Dallas, beat Brett Favre up in Green Bay, and then had to go and beat Brady undefeated, in Phoenix. I just sit back and I go, man, like, you couldn't have asked for anything more from this guy, and he did it. Daniel Jones isn't that.
Mm-hmm.
So I sit back and look at it and go, they have a long road. It's going to be tough. And speaking of tough, we'll just jump right to the Commanders. Now, the tough part that's not so tough for the Commanders is this: they have the most money in cap space this coming year with $73 million. So you sit back and you look at who they're losing, possibly their wide receiver Samuel, starting cornerback Fuller. They are losing sort of, I want to say, their backup. He was a starter for a little bit in Jacoby Brissett. I know they don't have a head coach right now. Everything that's being talked about is that Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach. He's like pretty much written in. It's just waiting for the Lions to be either win the Super Bowl or get eliminated from the playoffs or lose the Super Bowl. I just sit back, if we're wrong about that, I really don't see there being any coach outside of Belichick that they get hired that I want to almost re-record the episode, because I think that changes things. I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Commanders, I look at it and I go, you don't want Sam Howell, so you need a quarterback. They're sitting with the number 2 overall pick. They really need a defensive secondary. That's sort of been their Achilles heel for the longest of times. I remember back when the first time that they tried to fix their secondary, I'm not sure if you remember this, is when Josh Norman, he was really, really good with the Panthers, and they went out and signed him, and they tried to make Josh Norman was a great zone cover, say, cornerback. He
Mm-hmm.
was not your man on man Darrell Revis, and they brought him in to be Darrell Revis, and he got burnt. And the the Commanders, the Redskins, the Washington football team, for my entire lifetime, has been terrible in free agency. Like, in the number one guy I go back to, if you remember, was Albert Hainsworth. They signed him from the
Mm-hmm.
Titans.
No.
And there is a play on YouTube that you can go watch where he gets blocked and he falls on the ground. And I think they're playing Vic, and Vic's just scrambling, and Hainsworth just lays there the entire time that this dude's running. And like, even Gruden gets on and circles him and is like, you've got to show more effort. And that's sort of been the Commanders organization. Now, I get that that was under Snyder. You sort of mentioned it. They're having this whole change. I know I talked a lot in terms of what they're losing, possibly gaining. What's your big overall take for the Commanders, and how do they dig out of the hole that they've been in for really the past two, since the 90s of the Super Bowl era?
Yeah. Uh, I was just looking at some of their free agents. The biggest gap that they're missing because they're losing Samuel potentially. They also are losing Byron Pringle, which I don't think he was much of a help, but he was another wide receiver. And then I had it pulled up here, standby one. There was Jamison Crowder. All right, so he came over from the Jets. So they're missing 3 wide receivers right out the gates of free agency. Honestly, if I was Scary Terry, I'd be asking to get out of town too. Put McLaurin, on a team that's actually going to have an impact. Just so you don't kill that kid's career. I think he's done fantastic for the Commanders, but it's about time that he moves on. I was looking at the offensive ranks. As far as offense goes for team stats, Washington was number 12. So I don't think anybody was expecting that with Sam Howell leading the charge and a little bit of Brissett getting to play. But that's just who being the enemy is. So I think they've got the right coordinator calling the offense. We'll see if he gets retained by Ben Johnson or whoever ends up leading the team. I think he needs to be in a coordinator. I would argue a head coaching spot for Eric. But there's a lot of question marks there. And as well as that defense, man, like there's just so many issues that have to be filled there. Like you said, good thing they have, better part of $100 million to go spend, 66, almost $70 million to go spend on free agents so that they can try to at least put a hodgepodge team together to be competitive. They're not going to get to the rank of the Eagles and the Cowboys within one season, but who knows what this money can bring to them. They've also got, the pick right behind the Bears. We'll see if they try to trade up to get that. I'm real interested to see, who that they're going to pick out of this draft to try to change this team around. I don't think Sam Howell is the guy, but he plays decent ball. I'll say he plays decent ball for, the guy coming out of North Carolina. But I'm lost about where we go with the Commanders.
This is my biggest take, and I could easily be proven wrong. Draft experts are proven wrong every single time. I just I know that if Caleb Williams goes number 1, the guy they're going to take is Drake May.
Yeah.
And I know that they all 3 came from the same school, and that may lead to some bias for me. But when I look at Drake May, Sam Howell, and Mitch Trubisky, I cannot tell a difference. Like, I just can't. Like, I don't. All of these guys are sort of the same dude. Like, it, I just I don't know what you're getting. Like, and I get that like Mel Kiper's high on this dude, but at no point, like, I watched UNC just get smacked by Virginia, And UNC was supposed to be a top 25 team. Looking at maybe they challenge Florida State, maybe they win the ACC and get Mac Brown back into a national championship scenario, and then they fold it. And
Mm-hmm.
you're the quarterback. Like Drake May, he had talent, he has guys, couldn't get it done. And I get that he has a good arm, and this is what gets me, and this is why I sort of go back to this Caleb Williams. It's really, for me, the only first round quality grade in a quarterback this year. Drake May is great when no one's touching him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sorry, you go to the Commanders, you're going to be running for your life. Like, and I'm sort of on your boat. Like, why not shore up other positions? Like, you could do so much with this pick, and that's sort of, it's like paying Daniel Jones when you take a guy that's not a home run in the first
Mm-hmm.
round. And sometimes it's not even worth. I know you've been real big and like, well, why don't the Bears just pick Marvin Harrison Jr.? And I'm like, I get that he would be a tremendous pick, but what you could get from trading back with how many other teams want to get up there and do that, I just sit back and go, maybe this is the time for the Commanders to sort of change their direction and trade back and get some other draft picks. You can, I mean, there's other teams that would happily trade up to number 2 to go get their guy. We'll just see. It's a tough scenario. I think that what you bring up though, because I'm going to immediately transition this into the Eagles. If Ben Johnson goes there and becomes the head coach and does not retain Eric Bieniemy, that should be the Eagles' next offensive coordinator. Like,
For sure. Yeah.
with as much, like the stat that you brought out, because I know that me and Maul, and I know you were privy to this text before you came on the podcast, we're not high on Sam Howell. And it, I know that he did not have the season that they wanted him to have, but he still had a way better season than I think a lot of people thought he would have. He kept them in games. Did he have some bad games? Yeah. Is it fully on him? No, that team's not great, but a lot of that has to be contributed to the fact that Eric Bieniemy had those guys well coached. He knows what he's doing on offense, and for me, that's what the Eagles have got to find as we sort of transition to the Eagles. The
Can I make
Eagles
a
are getting
plug real
Vic.
quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, man. So we're sitting here talking. Hal didn't get to play last year, or excuse me, 2022 season, but a couple of games, or maybe one game here. But looking at his numbers this year, he threw for 4,000 yards. 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns. Now he did have 21 interceptions. So, but you expect that out of a young guy. Look at Peyton Manning's rookie year and how many interceptions he threw. So here's a guy. He's playing ball in that offense. 4,000 yards is something to write home about. In the NFL. So I think that is a testament, as you kind of alluded to, with being the enemy. And also, they've got, if they want to stick it out like you were talking about, get more draft capital, they've already got 9 picks in this year's draft. So the opportunity to seize this draft and have the best draft, out of any team in the league is very high for Washington. And then not to mention, that high draft, or excuse me, the high salary cap moving into free agency, man, I think you would enjoy walking into that situation with a positive 5-year outlook if you can get the right pieces to the puzzle.
And talking about the right pieces, I mean, I'm just going to go back 3 years, and it's a big thing. When you kill yourself in the draft, it kills you for the future. You go back to 2020, they draft Chase Young, number 2 overall, no longer with the team. They don't have a second round pick. They have a third round pick, Antonio Gibson, good running back out of Memphis, but no longer the starter. So the following year, they go out and get Jamin Davis at linebacker. He may be a starter. I've never even heard of him. Offensive tackle. I look at the list. There's no one here on their 2021 roster that I even recognize the name. 2022, they go get Johan Dotson, wide receiver out of Penn State. I think he's made some plays, but he's not been the first round talent. Like for me, a first round talent's like that's made the difference is Zay Flowers, like or Jordan Addison. Like it's clear that those guys have that type of impact. The second round they get Mathis, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, and then the third round they get Brian Robinson Jr., who's now the starter. Now this is also the draft that Sam Howell happens in the fifth round. And then last year they get Emmanuel Forbes, a cornerback, who they end up benching halfway through the season because he just hasn't done a great job. Get another defensive back, Jarvarius Martin, and then you look at the rest of the draft. I don't really recognize anyone, and that's sort of it's the history of teams and why they've struggled. Like you sit back and you look at the Commanders and you think about last time they're in the Super Bowls, they were playing the Buffalo Bills when the Bills lost 4 straight in the 90s. Or they're the only other team with the Cowboys that has yet in this century to get to an NFC championship game. And it's because their draft history has been horrendous. Now, granted, Snyder's gone. So you can no longer use that as a crutch for the Commanders to say, hey, we've struggled because our owner was terrible. Now that he's gone, that's the biggest key for whoever they bring in as a head coach. They've got to start making the right decisions in the draft and getting guys that help that team in the future because it kills the team. Absolutely murders the team to not draft the right guy. And I mean, talk about draft. I think that this team we looked at as having a killer draft, and it really didn't work out for them this year, which was the Eagles. You look out, they get, Jalen Carter, they get Nolan, both from Georgia, both in the first round. Nolan really doesn't play at all. Jalen Carter starts off the year, and I'm like, yo, this is this is crazy. This dude fell to the Eagles, and you're like, hey, this is going to be a Super Bowl team again. And then for me, I just before I get into it, they're losing Kelsey, I believe.
Yeah.
If he comes back, great. I love him. It's also hard. He signed a 1-year deal last year for $14 million. If someone offered me $14 million to come back and play another year, I'd probably be like, I'd have some, I'd think about it. Fletcher Cox is a free agent. Their other end in Graham is a free agent. Running back Swift's a free agent. I sit back and I look at this team. They got $20 million of cap. They have the number 27 overall pick. They're trying to bounce back, win the division, get back to the Super Bowl. For me, all of their major issues on defense, when you compare this year to the Super Bowl year, that defensive line got home. I mean, they had 5 different guys with 10 plus sacks, and I watched them against Baker. I watched them against Dak. You look at them down the stretch, they could not get home. They had the exact same secondary, and it exposed the weak secondary because when you're not getting pressure, like I'm sorry, like cornerback's the hardest position in all of pro football. Like I can't imagine lining up against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and just being like, hey, you can't touch them after a yard, you can't hold them, you can't pass interfere. They have a right to the football. Keep up with one of the most athletic human beings on the face of the planet. Good luck. Like it's it's incredibly difficult. So when your defensive line isn't getting home, makes it super tough, super tough. So I look at the Eagles, they've got to figure out the defense, and also they got to work on the offensive line. Kelsey leaving you can't, he's a Hall of Famer, Hall of Fame center. So when he leaves and goes out the door, you can't just be like, hey, we'll just next guy up. Like they're going to have to figure out that piece. I think that Landon Dickerson, starting guard, played center for Bama for a while and was really good. I can see him sliding into that role if they find a guard at, the number 27 or another tackle that they can switch some guys around on that line to have Dickerson go play center. I can definitely see that happen with the Eagles. But in the trenches, the Eagles lost. Yeah. And that's what they're going to have to get fixed this coming year what is sort of your take on the Eagles? I know, you know, fold it down the stretch, but just sort of what's your take in the offseason and how they can regain getting back to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think the one person that we're not talking about most, leading the charge is Marcus Mariota, man. I mean, he's a free agent. No, all, all joking aside, um, Mariota's been a wonder for a while now, and uh, it seems like he came in and played that last game of the season, and watching him play against the Giants, I think when they were getting whooped, he looked like he was lost, man. Like just absolutely uh, like he was just not there. And you know, uh, I'll get back to it. Just all joking aside, he is somebody who's going to be available. I don't know any team that's going to pick him up necessarily. I could see his career coming to an end just with the lack of success he's had bouncing around from Atlanta, uh, to Philly for the last year. But yeah, man, you've alluded to it. I think obviously losing the Hall of Famer of Jason Kelsey, I think they're going to have to move away from the tush push. Maybe that play ends up getting banned. Like there's a whole bunch of talk that they've been alluding to. It's kind of funny. I saw a video saying of why it was so successful, and if you watch every single time that Jason Kelsey got down into the 4 point, he had moved that ball about a half yard. So I don't know how many times he actually did that and was successful, but it was on video that he was moving the ball about a half yard. I know it got called on him a couple times, but I'm sure there's probably some that went unnoticed. But the thing that scares me is that they've got uh, Swift gone, or not gone, but needing money. You've got Scott needing money as well. Oh shucks, I'm drawing a blank. But the other running back, not Gainwell. They've got another running back, Penny, all on the squad that are going to be free agents this year. So they're going to have a hole there. And we saw Swift. I mean, when you give that man the rock, he kind of looked like how he did in the Georgia days in some games. I remember the first time they played the Buccaneers early in the season, and DeAndre Swift was just lighting these dudes up. I think he went for 100 plus. That's a guy, that you can put in that RB1, and they kind of had that identity issue with who's going to play the number one running back. And I think it was Swift. He needs to be that guy. He got kind of pushed out of Detroit, and I think he found a home in with the Eagles. So I think they need to bring him back. What that looks like with only 20 million in the cap, I don't know. That's going to be tough. And then yeah, man, like you said, I don't know. Uh, there will be a couple of defensive linemen that they're going to have to pursue. Fletcher Cox is starting to get pretty old in terms of playing age. And Graham leaving as well. There are on the free agent list. I think you have to go and find somebody on the D line. I think bringing in Fangio is definitely going to help them from a defensive side. We kind of talked about that last episode. How the swap in Chicago was Fangio to Desai, and you saw the regression of the Bears defense. I think you will see a progression going from Desai, a little bit of Matt Patricia, back to Fangio. If Fangio can win these over. Fangio is an old school guy, so it's just a matter of if the guys on the defense like that hard nosed coach that tries to get them going. And then, yeah, we got to do something to help out that secondary, which I think comes back to that defensive line.
Yeah, I think if I had to give a prediction that I think would be a little bit surprising, I think the Eagles are definitely in play for one of the bigger running backs in the market, whether it be Saquon or Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry. I think all of those guys want to go to, a winning organization and have a chance to win. Like, could they easily all go to, I'm trying to think of a terrible, the Cardinals or someone, or even the Commanders, and just rack in a huge contract? Yeah. I just sit back. I don't think that Henry's the answer. I think someone like Jacobs or Saquon's the answer in Philly. Henry is to me, we're going to talk about this next. Henry to me is a Dallas Cowboy. Like the way the Cowboys run, which is downhill, they don't do a lot of zone read. Like Henry's not great out of the zone read. It's sort of interesting for as big as he is and for as much as he'll run some people over, sideline to sideline, like guys sort of hit him and he falls down quick. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is surprising to me. And I think that having someone like Saquon or Josh Jacobs back there would be a huge advantage for the Eagles. And that to me is what the Eagles really need to get to is running the football well, which I think that both of those guys, if you ask me who the best running back on the market is this year, it's Saquon by a mile. Um, that he to me is the best all around back that's going to be hitting free agency with the Eagles and Vic Fangio. I think the good thing is that this is where you can save some money. Is you can always go get some guys. You got to get rid of Fletcher Cox. You got to get rid of Graham. Why? They're going to cost too much money. Like
Yep.
based upon how long they've been in the years, the men that you're going to have to pay them, it's not worth it. Go find some younger cats that are trying to get the bag and let Fangio just have a rotation of guys that just go get this dude. Do your job. I promise you, you play well, you're gonna get a money year. So
Yep.
that's sort of for me where the Eagles are at. And also sit back and say you're number 27th in the draft. Like this is a good position that there are guys there that it happens every single year that guys fall in the draft. They really shouldn't have fallen that low, mainly because other teams are focused on getting a quarterback, a skill position on offense. That this is where the Eagles, could easily wind up with one of the better defensive players, a corner who gets overlooked, safety, a lot of things are still on play at 27th in the draft, and the Eagles don't have a lot of holes. So it helps the Eagles having a first round pick. I think Vic Fangio is going to do a fantastic job with the defense. Vic's always had a good defense. You look at the
Mm-hmm.
Bears, you look at the Broncos, and even with the Dolphins played well this year. Up until the injuries really started to pile up for him, which I'm sorry, as a defensive coach, you can't expect me to cook a 5-star Michelin meal with, ingredients from Dollar General. You got to have the better players out there. So for the Eagles, what are your thoughts on them going out and getting a big running back? You think that's in play?
Yeah, and here's the reason why. They've got 10 draft picks this year. So they're going to be able to get those guys that they want from the rookie deals to try to see if they can plug and play in the spots where they do need help. So that allows for them to be a little more loose, with the money, trying to pick up a big name back. And man, I honestly, that's the thing with DeAndre Swift. Like, to me, I think he's worth that kind of money. Now, do I think he's as good as Saquon? No. But I would put him up there, with Josh Jacobs when he has the success and actually gets the ball. When you got Sirianni guessing, who's going to be the running back, it's hard for a guy to get into a rhythm and get going. But I think towards the end of the year, we saw him being the main guy in the backfield for the Eagles. But like I said, they've got 20 million. They can go out and get that running back, and they've got 10 draft picks in this year's draft, which for being a team as good as they started to fall off like they did late in the year, you can get some talent there with those picks. They just got to be used appropriately by Sirianni and the scouts.
I mean, they've done a pretty tremendous job with their draft picks in the past, and they've been able to, I would say, absolutely fleece some teams with draft picks. I mean, trading for AJ Brown, they got their safety and Kevin Bard with the Titans yet again. Now he didn't, in my opinion, he really is on was on the downslope of his career. Really didn't play well, and it's not so much against him. That whole Eagles defense in the after going 10-1 fell off an absolute cliff. And it didn't help that Matt Patricia doesn't know what in the world he's doing. Like, that was not the solution, and we knew that after his time with New England. Like, we knew that Patricia really struggled outside of the Belichick era, and it showed itself once again. I think one of my favorite memes was Eagles fans watching Patricia screw that defense, and it was like Patriots fan, and it was that guy with the noose, and he's like, "Oh, it's a first time." Like,
Um,
that meme was classic. So for me, the Eagles, I think they have very few holes to fill, but there is Sirianni, I think, is just like Dabble with the Giants. He's on a hot seat. Like,
yeah.
it is, you better win the division and get these guys back and not look like you did last year, because I think at the first sign of weakness, they're going to be calling for his head.
Yeah, and I think you kind of saw that this year. Like, I guess he embodies everything that you think a Philly guy is, from the sidelines, and I think that's why they love him. But then you question something, as simple as putting Matt Patricia in charge of your defense. Like, how did that work out when he was the head coach of the Detroit Lions? You know, and now we bring in Dan Campbell and look at the team. So there's a lot of questions in his decision making. Um, you know, that kind of leaves him vulnerable. And just like Philly fans, I think it was against the Buccaneers. He was walking back into the tunnel, and his own fans are throwing popcorn at him. I think they're pretty fed up with him too. So I definitely could see him being in trouble, just like Daboll, but he's got more talent than the Giants do. So I think they're going to be able to work it out, especially, uh, if you talked about getting Eric being the enemy up there if he's not retained by Washington. I mean, I could not imagine how that offense is going to look with all the weapons they got with a really good coordinator calling the shots. Because, I mean, look at Shane Steichen. He made Gardner Minshew, look like a QB1 this season. And that's who used to call that all those players on offense. So I think you get a good offensive mind in there, and they're right back in the Super Bowl discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it was we knew it this whole season that that offense was not clicking like last year, and I put that on the OC. And I want to, you sent us out a text message I wanted you to bring up about offensive coordinators since 2022. You want to
Oh
run with
yeah,
that?
that was such a crazy stat. We saw since the year 2022, so all of two full NFL seasons. Every single team has a brand new OC. There's not anybody in the same seat of offensive coordinator that's been there since the year 2022, which I thought was a pretty crazy stat. The picture came with a raggedy looking Mike McDaniel in a 49ers hat back when he was calling the offense out there. And, it just shows how versatile, you think you get a good coordinator in the seat. He's able to, shine, especially a Mike McDaniel shining behind Kyle Shanahan. Then he goes to, the Dolphins. And I think they're a great team. I think they have a fantastic offense, but they just don't play in the primetime games. And, you know, uh, that could be a learning curve. That could be maybe it could be a lack of experience that Mike McDaniel has as a head coach and calling those big time plays. That maybe Shanahan was like, "Hey, I'm gonna take the play calling now here in the fourth quarter when this game matters." Maybe that's what it is. Is just trying to get over that hump. Um, or maybe he just sucks as an offense coordinator. I mean, who knows? Because then the guys end up getting canned and go back to being an OC. So it's just that vicious cycle, like we kind of talked about with the head coaches, and that's the same thing that happens, with these OCs and DCs for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned DCs. We can just jump right into Dallas. You talked about it looks like an inevitable possibility that they're going to lose Dan Quinn. I wouldn't be shocked for him to go to Seattle. I think that sort of fits Seattle's build. They want a defensive team. That's how they play. They've been playing that way since, the Pete Carroll era and the Legion of Boom up in Seattle. For the Cowboys, the positives and the negatives, and it's more negatives than positives. They losing right now, free agent starting left tackle Tyron Smith, who I will say older in age. A positive for the Cowboys is the Cowboys do a really good job at drafting offensive linemen. They
Mhm.
always seem to find those guys. They're losing running back Tony Pollard, and I think they let him walk because he didn't have a great year, and he's going to want to get paid more. And then cornerback Stephon Gilmore. Now this is sort of a negative and a positive. Stephon's definitely older. You still have Deron Bland. Trevon Diggs comes back. The positives of that is you get back your all pro corner. The negatives of that is I think Deron Bland and Trevon Diggs are the exact same guy. That
Mm.
they are very good at getting interceptions, but they also, due to the nature of trying to go get those picks, they get burned a lot. And it showed up against the Green Bay game. And I mean, Bland's been burned plenty of times. And if you go watch Diggs before he got hurt, Diggs is known for getting burned deep. And it's because he just really struggles in man to man. But I sit back and look at that. The other big negative for the Cowboys is they're minus $19 million in the hole. So that is going to be a tough thing for them to overcome. So with that in mind, the cap, who they're losing, what are your thoughts on the Cowboys and how they address, almost 30 years of not being able to get back to the Super Bowl or even more the NFC Championship game?
Yeah, I think, it comes down to Stephen Jones just telling his dad, "Hey, Dad, I'm taking the franchise over. We've had enough." That'd be option number one. We all know that's not going to happen. Jerry's going to stay with the team till he's in the grave. But I gotta say, being 20 million in the hole, they're going to have to shed off some guys. But the problem is, you're still going to get cap hits with that. So it's just a matter of if you can trade off guys and still be able to have another team pick up contracts, which that's a lot of guys to shed just to get back into the green. So I think they're kind of stuck with what they've got. Upcoming draft, they've got 5 picks. I can see easily that they're going to pick up an offensive lineman because you already mentioned it that they're a really good team at drafting offensive linemen, and they've got the first round pick. I could see going that late, you could get a decent, a decent lineman. They got the number 24 pick coming up, and then with the second round pick, let's maybe if we don't find a way to retain Pollard, we gotta have a running back. Deuce Vaughn. I haven't seen much of him this year. He was in the games. He got to play a little bit, but uh, I can't really say that we saw a lot of Deuce Vaughn playing this past year. So who knows if he's going to be the guy moving forward if they don't bring back Tony Pollard. So those are my first two pieces that they're going to go after: line and then another running back. And then after that, it's easy to always pick up, late. They've got the third round and then 2 in the 7 rounds, seventh round, excuse me. They're going to fill in with another DB if I had to guess. That would be where I see the Cowboys going. They're going to get an offensive line, they're going to get a running back, and then they're going to get some DBs.
Yeah, if there's anything Jerry Jones is good at, it's money. So
That's true.
they'll figure out the cap. They're going to rearrange some contracts. I said it earlier, and I'll go back to it. I feel like the Cowboys are the number one place for Derrick Henry. I think that Jerry wants to continue building the offense. He wants to give Dak help. I think that it would enamor Cowboy fans throughout the roof. It would spike jersey sales. I mean, immediately for them to go out and get someone like Derrick Henry, it
Mm-hmm.
would not shock me at all to see that, you know, happen in this year's draft. The bigger questions for the Cowboys is it's not just a money problem this year, it's what's coming. And it's exactly what they did when it was like, hey, you knew you're gonna have to sign Zeke, you signing Dak. You know, you had Amari Cooper, you had CD Lamb, they let Amari Cooper go. The next big guy that is going to be the highest paid guy in the NFL for his position,
CD.
it's at DN.
Mm.
You know, he is going. Um, I'm
Mike
blanking on his
Parsons.
name.
Micah Parsons.
Thank you. Mike Parsons is going to get paid. Like, and he's going to get paid the absolute top dollar.
For sure.
That to me for the Cowboys is it's this game of you're trying. I think that they have the roster, as much as I hate the Cowboys, to win the Super Bowl.
Agreed.
They are just a few pieces here and there away. One of the biggest pieces that you've already alluded to that they're missing is just an owner who stays out of it. That's not going to happen. I get that McCarthy has had, 3 straight years of, really good wins, and being a good football team. Them getting over the hump, I do think that this year, not having a running back that was just sort of that guy that you could turn to that, take pressure off of Dak. Take take pressure off the offense. The Cowboys, even though Green Bay came in there and really sort of laid it to them, the Cowboys had a chance late in that game to make it back a game. You take away Dak's 2 picks, and they're right back in that game. Like that
100%.
that was the difference of the game, the turnovers. I just for me, them going out and getting a star running back, I think you're gonna see. I think that they may try to re-sign. I'm not sure. I don't think Brandon Cooks is a free agent this year. I think he did pretty good things with the offense. Gallup, they'll let go. They'll go find someone. I think Turpin's can play that slot well. They'll find a guy that's going to fit what Dallas wants. And for as much as they throw the football, as long as he's not Kadarius Toney and can catch the football, he'll do well in that offense. It's about shoring up that secondary, possibly getting a defensive tackle that can really take away some of that impact on Micah Parsons on the outside and Lawrence on the other side to really be that force up the middle. Because let me tell you, if you have 3 guys that it's just like, dude, I don't know who to block, you win games. Like you win games from getting home. And the more that you can make it so that teams, when they double Micah, they, you're leaving other guys one on one and they're able to win those matchups. It helps. It helps. So, yeah, it's a tough thing. I think they'll have to restructure Dak's contract, which, like I said, if you tell him, hey, we're going to go out and get Henry, I need you to move some money around for us to be able to do this, guys are way more willing to go do that. But what are your thoughts on them possibly going out and getting Henry? How do you think he'd fit in that offense?
Yeah. The one thing that has always been great about the Cowboys, you already said it, but Emmitt Smith even said it in his Hall of Fame speech. He had a line, and that's the one thing that the Cowboys bring to the table year in and year out. I think that's why Dak plays so well. He's always had a great line that's protected him. And who wouldn't, as a running back, who would not want to stand behind, that type of line to, get back a little bit of resurgence, of Henry's career that he's lost out on this past season. Why wouldn't you want to go stand behind a better line than what you had in Tennessee? I think it's a no-brainer. We'll see. From the standpoint of the running back, it'd be a no-brainer. As whether or not that Jerry's able to pull it off will be the big question that we see moving into the offseason.
Here's my other question for you and see what your thoughts on this are. Is this a make or break year for Dak Prescott?
Man, the problem that I have with that question, and I mean, God love the kid. He's been under scrutiny every single season since he's been drafted to that team. The amount of pressure that he has, and he stepped up, to the plate. And if it wasn't for those 2 interceptions, we can continue to go back to that. First 2 drives, interceptions, and it's hard to come back for that for any team. I guarantee you if Mahomes threw 2 picks to start this weekend, granted they're playing Baltimore and they're probably not going to come back from that. But just any team in general, let's even say the Commanders, you throw 2 picks, they immediately get 2 touchdowns. You're down 14-0. It's going to be tough to pick your way back into a game like that. So As far as being a make or break year, I mean, Dak for the last 3 seasons has been 12-5. Yes, they've gotten bounced from the playoffs. Like I understand that. I I have a lot of respect for Dak. You know, I would love to see him continue to progress. You know, I think back, you know, we saw it the very first year that he was in the league, him and Zeke. Uh, you know, when they led the team, Tony Romo got benched. I can't remember the same year, but it was the year 2016, 2017-ish time frame uh, when Zeke, I know for a fact Zeke was a rookie, and they made it to the playoffs and were just, they looked unstoppable. I think Dak still has that. Dak still plays elite football. Mike McCarthy puts a lot on him. I mean, the Green Bay Packers game, he threw 60 times. You know, Dak is a player in my book, and I don't think it is a make or break year. I think you stand by Dak because who are you going to get that's better? In a cap space where they're at right now, who will Dallas get that's better than Dak?
Yeah, I don't say it so much as from, I think, our perspective, a make or break year. I think we realize that it's like, you look at the vast QB market of how many teams would probably pay to have Dak. There's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's
yeah.
more of, you know, Jerry Jones wants a Super Bowl,
Yeah.
wants it, and
Before
I
he
think
dies.
that he
Yeah.
realizes, yeah, before he dies, like he wants to see him win at least one more. And the frustration is going to happen with two people. It's going to happen at the position of head coach, and it's going to happen at the position of quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two. It is the New York market in Texas because it's the Dallas Cowboys. You're under a tremendous amount of pressure, which, let's give Dak, like you said, credit. He was a fourth round pick out of Mississippi State. I think when they drafted him, they knew that, hey, this is probably a project. And it turned out to be very successful for what it was and
Mm-hmm.
still is. But from the standpoint of, you got to get them to the game and you have to get them out of the divisional round, that's where the struggles have happened. I mean,
For sure.
because you can look back, last year, hey, time's running out. What do? Let's run it against San Francisco and run out the clock. Like, now, that first loss that they had with Zeke and Dak, and you thought they were going to be unstoppable, was against Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers pulled off just one of the best throws in NFL history on the sideline to Jared Cook and knocked him out with a kick. It was just one of these ones. And even this year with the two picks, like, now they weren't, I wanted to just correct it. Green Bay scored, Dak threw a pick, Green Bay scored again, and then I think Dallas was down 21-0, and that's
That's
when he
right.
threw that pick six. Let's be honest, Jordan Love destroyed that defense.
100%.
Like, as much as, in that's sort of a difficult part, is we look at Dak and we're like, yo, you cost us this game with two picks. If the defense had just chose to play in the first half, it is a different story. Like, in every time that Dallas would drive down and score, Green Bay responded. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
that defense did not help Dallas's offense to save their life. Like, in Green Bay was on a train to put up 50 on those guys. It was just, that to me was the bigger story. Was, I did not expect Dallas's defense with Micah Parsons to look like they did, completely unprepared for how well Dan Quinn coaches the defense. That was the most shocking piece to me, which is the other big piece for Dallas. If Quinn leaves, you got to go replace that. And that's
Exactly.
tough. That's tough, especially now that, these guys who are defensive coordinators are taking head coaches jobs, like Raheem Morris going um, to Atlanta. You have guys that are moving around. The only guy, I know this is crazy, it's crazy talk to say this, that I could see possibly take the defensive coordinator job, knowing that if they have any problems, he'll move into the head coaching gig.
Mike Vrabel.
No, Bill Belichick. I know that's nuts. I think he does sit for a year. I don't think he coaches. I don't ever think he humbles himself to go be a defensive coordinator.
And have
I
no
know he
talk with
likes
the
Dallas.
yeah.
Yeah, that and just you don't want Belichick on defense arguing Mike McCarthy. Like they're
Yeah.
never going to do that. That's too much of a problem. I don't know if Vrabel will go and be a DC. I think Vrabel's a great DC. I mean, for as bad as the Titans were, their defense was consistently good. You want to find that, but the Cowboys are going to have to find that. I think that Belichick's sort of that match made in heaven. That it's like, hey, if at any problem, hiccup in the road, we're just going to make you head coach and let you take over. The only issue is I don't see Jerry Jones giving Belichick the the control that he wants in an organization. But it's and I the only reason I keep going back to Belichick and the Cowboys is Belichick told Jerry Jones before he ever took the New England job that he would love to coach the Cowboys. So it's a matter of what side's willing to bend. I'd argue that Belichick's going to have to be the one to bend the knee a little bit more. I do think that with him having 6 Super Bowl titles, it helps him convince Jerry Jones to, shut up and let me. I know what I'm doing on this pick. Let me go get this guy. We'll see. But the Cowboys are going to have to find someone to help that defense, not just player wise, but especially coaching wise if Quinn exits the door.
Yeah, I think, you bringing up Belichick, I was starting to go off on that tangent that you already mentioned, that he's not going to get the organizational responsibilities that, for him to make his own roster, and that's going to be the biggest fact between him and Jerry Jones. And so that's kind of why I don't see it happening. But it would be, what a send off for your last bit of your career. I don't see them going away from Big Mike just yet, and like you said, for Bill to step down into a DC role, I feel like he'd just be the grumpy old man, just ticked off at everything that happens because he has no control over it and just has to deal with it, type of thing. So that would be a very difficult struggle, between two alphas, I think, trying to lead that team. Uh, that's why I kind of said Vrabel, because he's not getting any love that I've really seen. There was a little talk with Seattle, but Seattle's round 2 with Dan Quinn. But then again, they were round 2 in Atlanta with Bill Belichick, so it's hard to say. I think that's funny that you bring that up because you just want to see how Arthur Blank fumbled that with Bill Belichick, and I guarantee you, it was exactly what we're discussing right now, is the organizational control that Bill wants to have, and I guarantee you, they're just like, nope, we like our culture, we're going to keep it. I don't know if Jerry Jones would be willing to do the same.
That's the exact article I read of why it didn't work out in Atlanta. Is they said that Atlanta's CEO, and these guys that they have in that administration role were pretty much like, hey man, like I don't think that this is going to work. Belichick coming in here, you're going to lose a lot of these guys that Belichick's not going to coach for much longer. Now, this is where, for me, I sit back and I go, let's just look at history. History tells me you ain't done this right ever for the Falcons. Ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like they
Easily,
got to a
yeah.
Super Bowl, lost a 25-point lead. The Falcons should have won that game. They should have won that game. I can't emphasize that enough. They had that game won, and every opportunity that they had to seal that game, they choked. From the moment it was 28-3, they continually could not end the Patriots, and the rest is history. I sit back and I look at the Cowboys, and if you look from the 90s on, it's the exact same team. Like
Mm-hmm.
the inability to finish games and to do things that you need. And I just sort of sit back and I look at both franchises and I'm like, if we're asking the question of, well, we don't want to upset the people that are here. Well, the people that are here are the same reason that the Falcons still suck. Like, you know, like it's clear you haven't made good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You went from being a Super Bowl team to being awful. Awful. I mean, you think about where the Falcons were with Matty Ice, Julio, Mohamed Sanu, Rodney White. I mean, they just were stacked. And then they were gone. I mean,
Yep.
terrible team. And I sit back and I look at the Cowboys, and at least the Cowboys have sort of said that they've been competitive. But at the same time, it's like this definition of insanity keeps popping up in my mind that you keep doing things the same way over and over again and expecting a different result, and it doesn't happen. Like,
Exactly.
I look at an organizational head and I'm like, maybe it's time to take some chances and to do things differently than you've been doing, because if not, you're not going to win. You're not
Exactly.
going to win.
Yeah, and that's why I see, this year it really comes down to what Dan Quinn is going to do, because I think immediately if they don't get somebody in there, to fill that big of shoes, I see a regression. Dan Quinn was getting calls last year to come interview. He's like, nope, I love being in the booth. I don't want that responsibility. And, for him to go out this year, maybe, he's getting tired of the same old, not seeing any different results, or, he's finally got that itch again to go be a head coach. We'll see. I I would be somebody that I want to throw out, just if he does take the job. I would see Brian Johnson from the Lions. He's already been tagged
Ben
to
Johnson.
who's the DC? There's two Johnsons up there.
Oh, you're talking about the DC. I thought you meant the
Y-
OC.
Yeah, no. Ben Johnson's run the offense. I think Brian Johnson is the DC for the Lions. Um, so I could see him being a name, because they were kind of bringing up who was going to or
Aaron
that
Glenn.
Aaron Glenn. Who's Brian Johnson?
I'll tell you what.
Anyway, yeah. Anyways, they're kind of talking about Detroit sweeping house with the success that they've had. Um, so that's kind of where I see that going. I'd
Brian
see.
Johnson was the OC of the Eagles this past year.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
I
So,
mean, it's
anyways, I see Aaron Glenn being the front runner, maybe to move to Dallas.
it'd be interesting to see where it all goes. I mean, there's definitely more questions in terms of some bigger. Each of these teams, the Commanders and Giants have multitude of big pieces. The Eagles and Cowboys, I feel, are just like one or two pieces away. But the offseason is for sure, as you spoke to. I think for especially the Eagles and Cowboys, you could be in major regression city if you don't answer some of these more difficult questions. I think the
Mm-hmm.
Commanders and Giants, it's sort of, you can always get better because of how bad you were. You've sort of hit your floor. For the Cowboys and Eagles, it's, you're trying to get over that hump, and a lot of teams struggle with just making the right calls. So we'll see. But outside of that, you got anything else for the NFC East? I know we've sort of beaten a dead horse with a lot of these teams.
Yeah, man. No, I think there's a lot of things that we'll see come to fruition come April, and just the whole off season as a whole. So I'm good with it.
Sounds good. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram, and our podcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Go to our website, footballtalksquadron.com. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Time to pull chalks. We'll see you next time.